You've thought about giving up. Not once, not casually, but in that quiet, exhausted way where your heart feels tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of believing when nothing seems to change. You've reached that point where surrender feels easier than faith, where silence feels louder than prayer, where the question isn't, can I keep going? But, should I? And yet, here you are. That alone matters more than you realize. Because sometimes the moment you are most tempted to let go is not the sign that it's over, but the sign that something is about to shift. What if this is not the end of the story? What if this is the chapter right before everything changes? Today, God is speaking to you, not in thunder, not in spectacle, but in that gentle, persistent pull on your heart that refuses to leave you alone. Don't give up on this person yet. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because heaven is still moving. And there are signs, not random coincidences, not wishful thinking, but spiritual confirmations that only make sense when God is still writing the story. The first sign is this: a connection that goes beyond logic. You've tried to explain it away. You've told yourself it's attachment, habit, memory, or emotion. You've tried to rationalize why this person keeps returning to your thoughts, why their presence lingers even in their absence. But deep down, you know this connection doesn't follow normal rules. It doesn't make sense on paper. It doesn't align with timing, distance, circumstances, or past mistakes. And yet it refuses to fade. You can be busy, distracted, surrounded by others, and still, something pulls your heart back to them. That's not obsession. That's not weakness. That's recognition. When God weaves two lives together for a purpose, the bond doesn't dissolve just because things get hard. It stretches. It tests. It waits. This kind of connection doesn't scream for attention. It endures. And the fact that it remains, despite disappointment, silence, or confusion, is a sign that this story is deeper than what your mind can calculate. The second sign is this: confirmations that bring peace to your soul. Not anxiety, not panic, not obsession, peace. In moments when you pray honestly, when you stop begging for control and simply ask for truth, something settles inside you. You may still have questions. You may still feel unsure. But there is a calm beneath the chaos, a quiet reassurance that says, not yet. Hold on. God's confirmations don't always come as instant answers. Sometimes they come as alignment. You hear the same message repeated from different sources. A verse appears at the exact moment you need it. A conversation mirrors the prayer you whispered in private. A sudden clarity replaces the urge to walk away. These confirmations don't hype you up. They ground you. They don't promise ease. They promise presence. And peace is one of heaven's clearest signatures. The third sign is this: a waiting season that prepares, not punishes. Waiting feels cruel when you don't understand its purpose. It feels like rejection, delay, or denial. But God doesn't waste time, and He doesn't waste you. If this season feels long, it's not because you're forgotten. It's because something is being built. Waiting exposes what needs healing. It reveals patterns that can't survive the future God is designing. It strengthens faith that cannot be shaken when the blessing arrives. If God gave you everything the moment you asked, some things would break under their own weight. This waiting is not about withholding love. It's about preparing vessels. And sometimes, the preparation happens in silence because noise would distract you from the inner work. The fourth sign is this: God is working on the other person's heart, even if you can't see it. This is the hardest part to trust. Because you want evidence. You want change you can measure. You want progress you can point to. But God often works in places you cannot access. While you're praying for clarity, God may be confronting them with truth. While you're learning patience, God may be breaking cycles in them. While you feel stuck, God may be dismantling walls you didn't even know existed. Transformation doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it happens quietly, slowly, painfully, away from your sight. And just because you don't see movement doesn't mean there is none. God does His deepest work in secret places. The fifth sign is this: obstacles are turning into steps for a new beginning. What once felt like barriers now feel like lessons. What once hurt now carries wisdom. What once confused you now shapes your discernment. You're not the same person you were when this journey began. Your faith has depth now. Your boundaries have clarity. Your love is no longer naive, it's intentional. Obstacles that once threatened to end the story are now the very things that could sustain it. Because if this connection were restored without growth, it would collapse under old patterns. But now there is maturity where there was fear, awareness where there was denial, and faith where there was control. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by design. And here's the truth you may be avoiding. The only thing standing between you and the miracle might be your doubt. Not your flaws, not your past, not even their mistakes. Doubt. Doubt that whispers, nothing will change. Doubt that says, I've waited too long. Doubt that convinces you to quit right before the breakthrough. Faith isn't pretending everything is fine. Faith is choosing to trust God's character when the outcome is unclear. If this message is stirring something inside you, don't ignore it. Not every message is for everyone. But when one feels personal, it's because God is personal. He sees your tears. He knows your exhaustion. He understands your desire to protect your heart. And He's not asking you to fight alone. He's asking you to trust. So what about you? Will you keep fighting for this love with faith? Or let doubt decide the ending? God is still writing this story. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is hold on just a little longer. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are human for feeling worn down by the weight of hope that has gone unanswered for so long. Faith does not mean you never feel like giving up. Faith means you bring that feeling to God instead of letting it harden your heart. There are nights when you replay everything, every conversation, every silence, every moment that felt like a turning point but wasn't. You wonder if you misunderstood the signs. You question whether your prayers were heard. You ask yourself if holding on has made you foolish instead of faithful. But listen closely. Doubt is not the same as disobedience. God is not offended by your questions. He is not threatened by your fear. He is not surprised by your exhaustion. What grieves heaven is not that you feel weak, but that you forget who has been carrying you all this time. There is a reason this connection still matters to you, even when logic tells you to let go. There is a reason your heart softens instead of hardening, even after disappointment. There is a reason walking away feels heavier than waiting. Sometimes God allows tension to remain, not to torment you, but to refine you. Because what's coming next requires a version of you that can love without idolizing, wait without controlling, hope without demanding. And you are becoming that person. Slowly, quietly, painfully at times. You may not realize it yet, but this season has already changed you in ways you once prayed for. You are more discerning now. You are less reactive. You pray differently, not just for outcomes, but for alignment. That's growth. And growth always comes before expansion. There's something else you need to understand. God does not revive dead things without purpose. If He truly wanted this story to end, He would allow your heart to detach completely. The longing would fade. The prayers would stop. The reminders would lose their meaning. But that's not what's happening. Instead, your heart keeps being called back, not in desperation, but in awareness. Not because you're clinging, but because something is unfinished. God doesn't tease. He prepares. And preparation often feels like delay when you don't see the full picture. You see fragments. God sees the entire design. You see today's confusion. God sees tomorrow's clarity. You see a person who seems distant or unchanged. God sees a heart in process. And yes, sometimes that process takes longer than you want. Sometimes it hurts more than feels fair. Sometimes it requires patience that stretches you to your limit. But patience is not passive. It's active trust. It's choosing not to poison your hope with resentment. It's choosing not to harden your heart just to protect it. It's choosing to believe that God can do what you cannot. You are not responsible for changing this person. You are not responsible for fixing the timing. You are not responsible for making things work. Your responsibility is faithfulness, to God first, not to an outcome. And here is a truth many people miss. Letting go emotionally is not the same as giving up spiritually. You can release control without releasing faith. You can stop striving without stopping belief. You can rest without walking away. God may be asking you to loosen your grip, not because the story is over, but because He wants to lead it. Sometimes holding on too tightly blocks what heaven is trying to do. Surrender is not abandonment. Surrender is trust with open hands. And when you reach that place, when you stop forcing clarity and start allowing God to move freely, things shift. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but deeply. You may notice your prayers becoming calmer. Your fear losing its power. Your heart no longer panicking at every delay. That's not you giving up. That's you maturing. And maturity is required for what comes next. Because if this love is restored, it will not look like the past. It cannot. Old patterns cannot survive where God is taking you. This next chapter, if it unfolds, will require honesty where there was avoidance, courage where there was fear, and humility where there was pride. On both sides, and that kind of transformation takes time. You may wonder why God doesn't just speak clearly, why He doesn't give you a definitive answer that ends the waiting. But certainty would remove faith. And faith is the very thing God is strengthening in you. Not blind faith, anchored faith, faith that doesn't depend on constant reassurance. Faith that stands even when emotions fluctuate. Faith that says, even if I don't understand, I trust you. That kind of faith changes lives. It changes hearts. It changes futures. And sometimes, it changes two people at once, separately, before bringing them back together. You are not being punished for hoping. You are not foolish for believing. You are not behind because you're waiting. You are in process, and process is sacred. Heaven moves differently than we expect. Quietly, strategically, intentionally. What looks like stillness to you may be alignment behind the scenes. What feels like delay may be divine timing protecting you from something you're not meant to endure again. God is not asking you to ignore red flags. He is asking you to discern. With wisdom, not fear. Faith does not mean tolerating what harms you. Faith means trusting God to bring what is healthy, whole, and aligned. If this story continues, it will be because both hearts are ready, not because one refused to let go. And if it doesn't continue in the way you expect, God will still honor the faith you showed in this season. Nothing given to God is wasted. No prayer, no tear, no moment of trust. You are not behind schedule. You are not missing your miracle. You are not alone in this waiting. God sees you holding on when it would be easier to quit. And He honors perseverance rooted in faith, not fear. So today, breathe. You don't need to decide everything right now. You don't need to force closure. You don't need to demand answers. You only need to remain open, to God, not to anxiety. Let Him strengthen you. Let Him lead you. Let Him finish what He started. Because if God is still writing this story, then the ending has not been revealed yet. And sometimes, the most powerful act of faith is not moving forward, but staying, without losing yourself, until God says, now. There will come a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when you realize something has shifted inside you. Not the situation, not the other person, but you. You wake up one day and the heaviness feels lighter. The questions don't claw at your chest the way they used to. You still care, but you're no longer desperate for answers. You still hope, but your hope no longer feels fragile. That is not indifference. That is strength being formed. God often strengthens you before He changes the circumstances, because if the circumstances changed first, you might mistake relief for healing. But healing goes deeper than relief. Healing makes you steady, whether the outcome is what you expect or not. And this steadiness is not accidental. It is the result of every prayer you whispered when no one was watching. Every night you chose faith over bitterness. Every moment you resisted the urge to close your heart just to stop the pain. You didn't become numb. You became rooted. And rooted people don't panic when the wind blows. They bend, but they don't break. There is a reason God allowed you to walk through this without guarantees. Guarantees would have kept you focused on the result. Uncertainty forced you to focus on Him. You learned to listen differently. You learned to love without possession. You learned that trust is not about knowing what will happen, it's about knowing who is leading. And now, something else is happening beneath the surface. Your prayers are changing tone. They are no longer, God, please make this work. They are becoming, God, align this with your will. That shift matters more than you know. Because when your desire aligns with God's will, fear loses its grip. You are no longer bargaining with heaven. You are partnering with it. This is where many people quit, right before this moment. They mistake emotional exhaustion for a sign to walk away, when it's actually a sign that their faith is being refined from emotional dependence into spiritual trust. You are not being asked to force anything. You are being asked to stay available. Available to God, available to truth, available to growth. Availability is different from attachment. Attachment demands outcomes. Availability allows God to move freely. And when God is free to move, He does things no human effort could accomplish. You may not realize it, but your willingness to wait without manipulating the outcome has already shifted the atmosphere around this situation. Prayer changes people, even when they don't know they're being prayed for. Your patience has spoken louder than arguments ever could. Your silence has done what explanations failed to do. Your faith has created space for God to work where your words could not reach. And yes, there may still be days when doubt resurfaces. Doubt doesn't disappear forever. It loses authority, not presence. On those days, remember this: feelings are not instructions. Just because you feel discouraged doesn't mean you're supposed to quit. Just because you feel uncertain doesn't mean God is absent. Just because you feel tired doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It means you are human, and humans grow tired before they grow strong. God never asks you to pretend you're okay. He asks you to remain honest and open. Bring Him your confusion, bring Him your fear, bring Him your longing, but don't let those emotions decide the ending. Let faith decide. Faith doesn't rush, faith doesn't force, faith doesn't collapse under pressure. Faith waits with expectation, not entitlement. And expectation rooted in God never ends in shame. You may wonder how long this process will take. That question itself reveals how deeply you care. But God operates outside of urgency. He works in precision. If He is taking time, it's because the outcome requires accuracy, not speed. Some connections are too significant to be rushed. Some hearts are too guarded to be healed quickly. Some futures are too important to be built carelessly. What God is preparing cannot be sustained by impatience. And here's something you may not have considered. If this person truly belongs in your future, God will not allow this season to destroy you. He may stretch you. He may challenge you. He may strip away illusions. But He will not break you. God does not bless through destruction. He blesses through transformation. And if this story unfolds the way you hope, it will not be because you endured endlessly, it will be because you became someone who could love freely without losing yourself. That is the real miracle. Not reunion, not reconciliation, but wholeness. Because a whole heart loves differently. A whole heart discerns wisely. A whole heart is not afraid of outcomes. A whole heart trusts God with or without answers. You are closer to that wholeness than you think. Every time you chose prayer over panic. Every time you chose compassion over resentment. Every time you chose faith over fear. You moved closer. And now, heaven is watching how you finish this season, not to test you, but to honor you. Will you allow God to complete His work in you, even if it takes longer than you want? Will you trust that obedience sometimes looks like stillness, not action? Will you believe that love guided by God never leads you astray, even when the path feels unclear? You don't need to chase. You don't need to prove. You don't need to convince. What is meant for you will meet you, when the time is right, when both hearts are ready, when God's purpose is fulfilled. Until then, stay grounded. Stay prayerful. Stay open. Stay faithful, not because you're afraid to let go, but because you trust God enough to wait. And if there comes a day when God gently tells you to release this completely, you will be able to do so without regret, because you loved with faith, not fear. But if there comes a day when God says, "Now," you will step forward stronger, wiser, and ready for something real. Either way, you win. Because you did not abandon faith in the waiting. And that, more than any outcome, is what heaven calls victory.